Welcome to the Elevated Woman interview series, where you will learn how to activate your feminine energy to attract the beauty, prosperity, and love that you were born to experience. My name is Anya Grace, and I'm so excited to be your host for these powerful conversations with renowned experts from around the world. To get permanent access to these interviews and other amazing resources, go to eastwestwoman.com and join our uplifting community as a member. All right, welcome today for East West Woman's online interview series, Elevated Woman. We have Mark Quepet, who's a professional coach and teacher in the field of masculine self-development. He works with men around addiction to pornography and escapism and helps so many men realign their lives and really live up to their full potential. So I just really recognize you, Mark, for this role that you're playing for the world right now. And I think that there's so much talk around women's empowerment and what the feminine energy is, but really bringing that into the balance with helping men also understand their power, their true power is absolutely crucial at this time. So I really honor you for taking on that role in the world and following your heart and just, being of service, really.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. I really appreciate you having me on.
Yes, me too. Thank you. So I think it'd be a great place to start, just if you would talk about some of the challenges that men are facing right now, next.
Well, there's a lot of challenges, I think. I mean, there's challenges on both sides of the spectrum, obviously, but I think one of the core challenges is just the narrative, just the idea that, women are awesome. They can do anything. And men, you kind of just suck a lot. You're not really that great. And you should probably just step back and, give up and, or give all the power to women. And, it's not all like that, but growing up, I was primarily taught by women. Most school teachers are women. And we constantly heard about how great girls were and how they could do anything. And they didn't really give that to us guys. And I think it's just assumed that because of the patriarchy or however you want to frame it, men automatically know how to be good, or they know what they're supposed to do, and they don't need encouragement, but they absolutely do. And so I think it's a confusing time to be a man because there's not a clear definition of what masculinity is out there. And so men are kind of lost and floundering around. Some are disconnecting from society and just kind of trying to go their own way. Some are just trying to be very submissive and subservient. And then there's others that are just kind of, they take things in the opposite direction and they rebel and, they kind of just go toxic. So it's a confusing time to be a man, I think. So it's really good that we're having these kinds of conversations.
Absolutely. Thanks for that recognition. Yeah. So you do a ton of videos and teachings around true masculinity, what mature masculinity is. And I think it'd be great to talk about that specifically. What does it look like when a man is living up to his full masculine potential?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I maybe have a little bit different definition of masculinity and femininity than a lot of people. Like, I don't think that masculinity owns like strength and aggression and femininity owns like compassion and, teamwork or something like that. I think those traits, they exist both in men and women, but masculinity is a skill set or a mode of being that is designed to help a person work with a masculine biology. Meaning, like, there are certain self-development principles or self-management tactics that I think work better if you have high levels of testosterone versus if, you have high levels of estrogen. And so masculinity then is, like, in a mature sense, it's a man who knows how to work with his kind of primal masculine forces, meaning, like, because you have a lot of testosterone as a guy, that means you have a very strong desire to seek status. You have a desire to seek, competition, to be aggressive, to have, you have this really strong sex drive, and sometimes even a drive for actual violence. And there's a purpose for all of that. But the mature man, he knows how to kind of take that monster and direct it. I don't want to say tame it, but he learns how to direct it. And if he does it correctly, then it's kind of like the monster on your team. Everybody hates a monster when they're the enemy, when the monster's chasing them down. And this is kind of that predatory male who has become, victim to his own passions. But when things are tough or hard or whatever, it's nice to know you have a monster on your team. Like when something goes bump in the middle of the night, if you're a woman, it's good to know that man next to you, he's in touch with that monster inside of him, and he can bring it out for your benefit. And so there are definitely softer and lighter sides of masculinity, but it's that those more potent, kind of harsher energies that I think a real man needs to learn how to integrate and use for the good.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that you talk about it as sort of a set of practices and techniques, like it's almost like a training. Because
very much so, because it's these things without any sort of guidance, they will destroy you. And this is what we're seeing in today's world, is men being destroyed by their kind of drives. You see them getting lost in meaningless competition, or getting lost in the fantasy worlds of video games and porn and that kind of stuff, because they haven't been taught how to direct this stuff. And so there's very much a need for better socialization of men. But I see kind of the confusion coming from women who've done a lot of this work for themselves, thinking that the solutions that work for them will also apply to men. And so this is where the idea of getting in touch with your feminine side as being the answer for men. And I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with you on that. Like the more work I do in understanding both the masculine and feminine energies in that male, female, however it shows up, however you choose, whatever feels natural, but that it's not about being the same. It's really about honoring differences and respecting different qualities so that we can elevate one another. And it's, not just expect us all to be the same. So
right.
Talk more about that later, but I literally fell in love with one of the YouTube videos that you did around the king archetype. And maybe if you want to go into kind of the archetypes of masculinity, mature masculinity, and especially that king.
Sure, absolutely. And so this is taken from a book called King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. And these concepts are found in other places too, but it's the idea that you have as a man these 4 archetypes that you need in order to balance yourself: the king, the warrior, the magician, and the lover. And so just summarizing it briefly, the warrior is kind of that aggressive, disciplined side, the attack dog that you can turn on and off when you choose to cut through resistance or put down threats. The magician is the man's ability to kind of tinker and take things apart and deconstruct them and learn, technological stuff. If you see by and far most people in the tech field, they're men, because they have this, archetypal energy in them to work technology. The lover is the man's ability to kind of touch, to really, I guess you could say, stimulate the feminine, to learn how to play and inspire life. This is kind of the softer side of masculinity that really lends a lot of vibrance to things. But then you have the king. And the king is the ordering principle in a man. It's him taking complete ownership over his other faculties and aligning them in such a way to create fertility. If you look at ancient times, the purpose of the king was to make a fertile kingdom. Like if the king wasn't reproducing, like if he couldn't get, an heir, like that was seen as like a curse on the land. And so in many ways, that is the power of the king energy, is to order for the sake of fertility, and to, essentially order things so that you can penetrate the chaos of, reality and make sure that life continues to thrive in all its facets.
Beautiful. I think the words like honor and dignity really go well with that archetype.
Very much so, yeah.
And you talked about in that video this idea that it's, there can be a mix up with men in power, for example, where the moment it turns to self-service, it's no longer meeting up with that, mature masculinity. And how you said that, that it's not also about necessarily giving into what the people want, but knowing how to take them to their highest, to the next level.
Right. Right. So there has to be a resilience. There has to be a serious ownership. You can't be a puppet and a king. You know, if someone else holds your leash, you know, if you're going to look at yourself as kind of like a dual nature, you got like this rational mind and this emotional mind. Your rational mind needs to be the only thing holding your emotional leash. It shouldn't be other people. Otherwise, you become a puppet. You get pulled in a million different ways. And we see this a lot in weak men today. They're puppets. They're unable to stand up to other people and that sort of thing. And you can't honor your king energy if you're being controlled in that manner. And sometimes being a good king means making hard decisions that not everybody's happy about. That's what it means to be a leader, period. So, you know, if you can't do that within yourself, then there's no way you're going to be able to hold that power in the world.
Beautiful. Yeah. And we connected before this about this topic of you know, it's really not about being the same as men and women, but acknowledging sort of the different qualities that are natural to us and letting those stand out. There's a book that has been mentioned in a couple other of these interviews by David Data that I know you've read, The Way of the Superior Man. And that book changed my life personally because it gave this perspective of masculinity that I hadn't allowed myself to understand, which is that naturally in relationship, there's this asymmetry where women are really focused inward on the relationship because love and feeling full of that love is like the best thing for us. But what's actually primary for men is like outside of that relationship and their purpose and their direction and their freedom. And I would love for you to kind of tie that into this idea of the king archetype and how it ultimately is in service of everyone involved, that he be oriented outward in a sense. And it's not, it doesn't mean that he doesn't love, you know, his partner or anything, but.
Right. Well, that's the way he loves his partner the best, is by not putting her first, because at the end of the day, you know, a man needs to pursue his highest conception of goodness. That needs to be his only ordering principle. And that has to go, you know, it has to be a big thing, because a guy, I think, has to be really embody this hero archetype and the hero of the world. That's like, you know, if he's not trying to do that in his own personal small way, then he's not living up to his potential. And so like, that's bigger than one person. That's bigger than one relationship. And I think women, whether they know it or not, they test men. They constantly see if they can control them by digging at him, or, you know, maybe being a little bit unfair or whatever. And they want to see how he responds. They want to see, does he abandon his pursuit of goodness, his pursuit of, you know, true order and fertility, you know, in a universal sense, or does he stay true to it? And even if it goes against your immediate desires, I think women feel more safe and taken care of if they know that they can't manipulate their man. They can't get him to abandon his goals and his pursuit of goodness, because then they know that no one else can either. And that gives you that order, that sense of stability then, where the woman can turn inward and focus on all that stuff, because they know the perimeter is taken care of. They know that, you know, he's going to watch the outside, she's going to watch the inside, and then they can both meet there in this beautiful space that they've created.
That's so beautiful. Yeah. And it goes in line with something that I really think is inherent in the masculine, which is this wisdom that the masculine holds in knowing how to take a woman out of her head and into her heart and into her body, because that ultimately it's a benefit for both when that inward process can happen. And I think that's a gift that the masculine energy provides for the feminine.
Right. And you can't do that if the outside world's not taken care of, you know. And this is one of those things where you see it in, you know, intimacy issues all the time. It's like, if the guy's not taking care of stuff, like, and, you know, just general life is not in order because he's not showing up and doing his part or whatever, and then he's mad that the woman can't get out of her head enough to be intimate with him. Well, you know, come on, you gotta create your orderly kingdom if you want the the queen to come out, as it were.
Right. Yeah, that she can let go and feel safe enough to fully surrender.
Exactly.
Totally cool. What's the important, talked about this slightly earlier, just this importance of polarity and going more into kind of strengthening that polarity for healthy relationship.
Right. So obviously there's a practical need for it. You need to have order, some kind of clear flow of energy so that things can happen. If there's no leader, then nothing's you can't have, like if you're dancing, both partners can't lead. Otherwise you just kind of step on each other's feet. Right. So this doesn't necessarily need to be the man has to lead and the woman has to follow. Not by any means. In some areas, it's usually like switched, and depending upon what's being looked at. Maybe he leads in finances and she leads in house management, or vice versa even. But there's got to be something for that practical flow. But then on another level, you have to have polarity in order to create sexual tension. You need to have polarity in order to create intimacy. Otherwise you just have two neutral forces kind of just bumping into each other and then bumping away. You want that strong magnetic, like, right? But the thing that I think is being lost in a lot of the modern discourse is that biologically men and women on average are attenuated to different sides of that spectrum. Meaning, like, I think a man has hormones that can allow him to thrive in the more dominant position and actually gain energy from it. So like if a man's in a dominant position, because of the nature of his testosterone, he increases in power, he increases in vibrancy and energy. And some women do function like that too, and there's some men who don't. But on average, I would say that's the case. And then vice versa, women, if they have to step into that aggressive role, that just stresses them out. And if they have to hold that, they actually don't have the hormonal support to make that a really thriving mode of being for them. And so I think that there is value in figuring out where that's true for you and your partner, so that you can, maintain a polarity that's actually sustainable. Because I think a lot of times, especially in modern relationships, there's this polarity of the woman taking the dominant role because she feels like she has to, she's been told that she has to, and the man taking the submissive role because he wants to be a good, feminist man or whatever. And neither side ends up being happy with that. It's like, yeah, there might be some polarity, but it's draining. If that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I think about on the other side of things, when I get to, as a woman, let's say, take an entire day for self-care, like go to the spa, like do my yoga, run, be outside in nature, be with my friends, and go in a sauna and put lotion all over. It's just like the way I feel about myself is I feel so much softer and so much more beautiful and so much more receptive to, so much more polarized almost on that feminine side, and how like I feel the opposite of drained. I feel completely filled up. And I've realized more and more as I sort of embark on this journey myself, that is something that I really want in my life. Although I want to, have a career that I feel fulfilled in, I also want to, I think primarily for me as a woman, I'm starting to value that being like, those spaces in my week, every single week, that I can do that self-care is like really one of my biggest priorities at this point.
Absolutely. And, that's one of those things where I think the traditional model can't be thrown away, because for many people who fall into kind of these averages that I'm talking about, the traditional model works great. If you can, like, this is what me and my wife have currently, is like, she only works part-time, and then she kind of supports me and does stuff around the house. And then because of that, I can focus on making the money. And then she has all the time and space she needs to do kind of that self-care that you're talking about. And I think that that's a really great dynamic when you can figure out that that's what works for you.
Absolutely. Because then it just makes the relationship stronger. And I think that that's such, it is a huge value, I think, for everybody in their life. So yeah, beautiful topic. Would love to kind of hear about your personal story and why you are where you're at today.
Sure.
Challenges that you faced along.
Yeah, I think for me, it was a journey of trying to figure out where the heck my sexual energy fit into the world. If you look into my work, it's, I was a porn addict basically, and I never felt good about it. Wasn't who I wanted to be, but it felt like it was my only option, and also was championed as normal and even healthy in a lot of instances. But I knew there was something wrong with it. And so I was trying to quit, and I struggled and I struggled. And then eventually I found online communities that are focused on this. And there's men trying to quit porn by the thousands right now. And I found all of this science and stuff backing up how it's like so bad for you. And I had always been really interested in personal development. So once I kind of had the community and the science on my side, I was able to drop it. And I saw that there wasn't much leadership in this field. Not many guys willing to put their face on the issue or know how to help. And so I was like, hey, I was just training to be a life coach at that time anyway. So I was like, this could be my niche. I can do this. And it's been really good to me. And, I've helped a lot of people. So that's kind of how I'm here.
Yeah, totally. What do you, with all your expertise and background in this, what are, I just have so many emotions around this topic, I think personally. And what do you feel are some ways in which pornography has really hindered and hurt the masculine and the feminine in general, and just like sexual health and relationship? And, yeah.
Oh man, so many ways. All right, so I'll give you the big picture, and then I'll get into like the smaller details. So it's like the big picture is that you got society. At the heart of society, you got the family. At the heart of the family, you've got essentially husband and wife, and you've got that sexuality, that sexual charge between them. That's at the very center of our world. Okay, and by having men funnel their sexual energy into porn, you're destroying that union. And because of that, there are going to be negative ripples throughout all of society. And I think we see that in the collapse of the family structure and that sort of stuff. I think a lot of it, I mean, it's even, it's statistical. Like you can look at how many times pornography is mentioned as a reason for divorce, and divorce just, screws stuff up and makes things so bad. So, that's a big picture issue. But then on the smaller level, like the more individual level, porn addiction screws men up in a lot of different ways. One, it makes them, addicted. It steals a lot of their energy and their time. But it also objectifies themselves. There's this kind of mutual objectification that occurs. And like porn addiction is one side of the coin. And then I guess I would say eating disorders and body dysmorphia and that kind of stuff, like body obsession, that's like the feminine side. And so basically it creates this idea that a woman is only as important and valuable as they are beautiful. And that a man is only as important and as valuable as, the sex that he's having, and the value and the quantity of sex that he's having. And so it causes men to measure themselves by the notches on their belt, and women by, their, waist size or boob size or whatever. So this whole thing is just dehumanizing. And it just screws a lot of stuff up. Is that a good entry point? Does that make sense?
Good intro. Yeah, absolutely. Dehumanizing it's yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's not good stuff. So, I mean, right now we're seeing more and more men just live their life like this. And as porn gets more sophisticated, as, virtual reality becomes a thing, we're going to have whole masses of men disconnect from the modern world. And it's like, this is a bad thing for the modern world, because societies have typically been judged or typically been successful insofar as they could position sexual gratification on the other side of becoming a good person. So it's like, in the past, it was like you got to reproduce and have access to women if you were a good man, an honorable man, you worked hard, you did this kind of stuff, and someone was willing to marry you. But now, you don't need to do any of that to get sexual gratification. So a lot of men just aren't. And you throw that into a culture where a man feels like he can't get respect anyway, just because he's a man. You just have a lot of dudes just disconnecting. And guess what, ladies? That just means that it's going to be more on you, and you're going to feel, like you don't have support. You don't, it's just going to be hard on all fronts, and it's not a good thing. So we really got to repair this, I think.
Yeah, it feels like an epidemic in some ways.
Oh yeah. I would say probably 90% of dudes use porn regularly, and probably, most of them would not be able to quit it if they tried. They would be very surprised. So it's just really kind of gone under the radar because it's a taboo subject or whatever, but it's like 50% of all internet usage or something like that. It's like,
oh my God. Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. No, I didn't even know that. That's wild. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, yeah, I just think that, one thing that I feel really passionate about is, as a powerful woman, understanding her power more and more as I evolve and heal and all of those things. I don't want to do this alone. I don't want to, I want there to be this. I actually had a pretty deep moment a little while ago where I realized that I had this kind of deep inner fear that no man was going to stand up for the issues around sexual violence as much as I or the other women in the world and in my life. And I think that it really hit me when I realized that inner fear and sadness, because I want to be protected, I want to be protected by men, and at least have them on my side supporting. And so I just think that out of, there's so many conversations on women's empowerment, I really believe it to be important that we turn our attention to how can we not leave the other half behind, but do this together.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of like sexual violence and sexual trafficking and all that kind of stuff, you're not going to do that on your own. That's going to have to be a self-motivated thing on the acts of men. Because it's like, on the individual level, it's 100% the result of men who don't know how to order their passions, who maybe don't have a moral compass, or they do, and they just choose not to use it. And chances are why you don't feel like you have more allies on that front, is because a lot of them use porn themselves. And it's like, how can you like, I think it's difficult to maintain the level of authenticity necessary to be a truly strong, supporter of that. And so that's what I'm trying to do, is I'm trying to approach it from like a more roundabout level of like, all right, dudes, let's look at this sex drive inside of us and figure out what the heck it means. But I think, it's not just a masculine issue when you zoom the camera back, though, because if women are embracing this idea of self-objectification for the sake of getting attention and power, and it's like, it's my body, I'm going to dress what I want, I'm going to show it off how I want. Well, you're sending a message, like, you're not doing it just for you. You're doing it because you want attention. You want the male gaze, but you also want to reserve the right to be repulsed with the male gaze. So it's like, let's be honest with ourselves here. You're status seeking here, and you're doing that is encouraging men to look at you as an object. And by doing that, this is what facilitates this whole thing. You tell them, if you portray yourself as a woman, and this is not necessarily, I don't think women do this consciously, but it's in all the advertising. It's like, my sexuality is irresistible. It's necessary. You want it. Every woman wants to be desired. And so this is, pummeled throughout our society, in the narrative. And men start to believe it. They believe, I need this. I got to get this. If I don't, I'm not okay, something's wrong, I'm going to die. And so that's the beginning of the justification for sexual misconduct, because it's like, you have something that I need. You've told me my whole life that I need it. And so I'm just going to get it. I'm just getting my needs filled. And that is the rationalization. It's like just getting a need met. And we have to take a more sophisticated, a more centered view around sexuality, opposed to just indulging in this immediate gratification stuff, because it's really leading us to a bad place.
Absolutely. For a moment I was stumped there, because I was just like, holy moly, that's such a good point, that it's pushing even what I've thought about. But I think it speaks to like the wounding on both sides. And I think women, personally, I've had to really understand my beauty. Like, for a long time, I didn't think I was beautiful, and I didn't feel desired. And I think part of it was because of those inner beliefs, it wasn't showing up in the external world. And as I started to realize it more and more, I started to get different engagement from the external world. And there's definitely been this process where I haven't been respecting men. I've been just wanting them to want me, and sort of and not being honorable to them. And so I think that's I know that that comes from my deeper insecurities. And so on my side, as a woman, I think part of like that more sophisticated approach comes from me really taking myself on, and taking responsibility for that, you know?
Right. Exactly. And so it's like, you know, I think just to put it in perspective for women, all right, imagine that all guys have like this animal inside of them, like think of it like a dog, all right, and they've got a leash on it, and like if you walk by and you like toss a bunch of, you know, like a steak on the ground, it's going to make their animal go crazy unless it's an incredibly well trained thing, and they'll just look at their master, and the master will be like, nope, and then they'll just walk on, and chances are you're going to be really interested in that guy. But you know, women will do that just because they want to feel the power, and they want to feel like I can control that reaction in them. So there must be something good about me. I must, like, they use that as a way to measure their own value. And we have to break away from that. And it's tough though, if you're surrounded by, if you fail to find a man who can really give you that kind of attention in an authentic and healthy way. So it's like, I get it. It's this weird kind of interconnected issue where it's, you know, men not disciplining themselves, but then also women not making it easy for men.
Yeah. I feel like let's revisit this conversation, like this topic specifically, because I think, yeah, there's so much here that I haven't, this is like next level. I think for this general topic, you know, I think it could be a really helpful thing for the world to just kind of explore this. How can we take responsibility on both sides?
Sure. I'd love it.
Yeah. So I know you do a lot of work around sacred sexuality, or you have in the past, and that's been a big part of, you know, also me understanding my power as a woman is really healing my relationship with my sexuality, and would love to kind of hear about what sacred sexuality is to you and what is possible in sex and love.
So that's a really good question. To me, sacred sexuality is sexuality where you are focusing on maximizing meaning. Okay. And so on a practical level, often what this looks like is a form of restriction. So like, think about it like this. Imagine that your mom makes this, you know, amazing cake. All right. And it's really, really good. And it comes out at holidays. And, you know, when she brings it out, it's just amazing and perfect. And everybody goes crazy for it. You know, you like it so much that you decide to start having it all the time. Okay. You have it every day. And when you start having it every day for every occasion, whatever, it stops being so special. And you just start gaining weight and maybe getting diabetes or something, like, you know, like bad stuff starts to happen. And that's kind of what I think we've done with sexuality, is that we've taken this thing, it's so great and so beautiful and so good, and we've abused it. And because of that, it's lost its meaning. So to me, sacred sexuality is the practice of restricting sexuality, at least in its overt sense, because I think you can be very sexual and transmute your sexual energy without actually engaging in sex, but restricting it in an overt sense so that it only is used in the areas where it is most good, where it maximizes meaning. So for me, that means like saving my sexuality and funneling it into my wife, you know, giving it to her. And because of that, just by the nature of that restriction, it's special. The fact that I'm not, you know, jerking off to porn all the time means that it's even more special, you know? And so that's really what it's about. It's about learning how to prune off the offshoots that really are, I guess you could call, masturbatory or impotent or sterile, and funneling them toward a fertile end that produces more life, more goodness, more joy, more happiness, more union, and that sort of thing. So it's about focus to enhance meaning. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Totally. Like containment, which...
Yeah, but yes. So yeah, it's just like, you know, if you have a hose, you know, if you have water and you just let it flow out, it's kind of just drips out. But if you like put your thumb over it and you focus it, it comes out like a focused beam. That's really what it's about, I think. And maximizing that meaning and that intensity. That
power. Totally. I love that. Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, you know, just thinking about really that how fun it is to kind of contain and separate, like in relationship with somebody, like not, you know, the time apart is really valuable for that coming back together. And it's almost, I would say, like in relation to what you're talking about, the focus, it's sometimes we have to focus away so that when we focus back on that sexual intimacy, it's even more powerful, and on both ends, you know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of like, it's the balance between fasting and feasting, like if you really want to enjoy some good food and you're going to eat a lot, well, you don't eat right before, right? Let yourself be hungry and learn how to cultivate and enjoy the hunger. And then, the fulfillment then is that much more sweet.
Right. Yeah. But, okay. It's hard. Personally, I know it's important, but I think right now in my life, I just struggle with I know it's important to not spend all the time with that person, but it's hard. It's really, and I've had relationships kind of go, be challenged because it's I just want to spend all my time with that person. But I think I'm valuing more and more and more as I experiment with all of this, that being intentional about taking space away ultimately serves the relationship in a deeper way.
Well, so on a psychological sense, I don't know if you've ever thought about it like this, but you have to, I think, be careful of projecting your heaven onto that person, because no person's going to be your heaven, and there's a really good book on this. It's more of a Catholic bent. I don't know if anyone want to read it. It's called Fill These Hearts. But the core idea is that you're going to have your best relationship when you recognize that person's not going to be your heaven. And you're going to, because then at that point they can be a person, they don't need to be your savior. They don't need to be your safe space. They don't need to be this and that. And you can meet them where they are. And then you can have, at that point, you're not trying to get something from them. You got to be two additive forces coming together as whole, and you got to create something good, rather than being like, I'm this, black hole and you're this black hole, and we'll kind of vampirically eat each other and, get along that way. So it's there's sometimes there's just that desire to connect, and it's awesome. And especially if it's a new relationship, there's all that infatuation and good stuff going on. But, sometimes there's, what we're really hungry for is our own affirmation and our own care and our own leadership. And I don't know, it's difficult to navigate that, but I don't think there's anything wrong with liking your partner a ton.
Yeah, totally. But no, you're right. It's how much am I putting my happiness on that person? And I think it's also hard because, at least what I've experienced, I haven't hit the highs that I've hit in relationship very often on my own. And so it's I'll come into a new relationship and be super powerful. I'll just be in my absolute, radiant, beautiful, empowered state where I feel super confident, and then merge and hit these high notes. And then it's when I separate, I can't hit those high notes by myself. So it's I look to that relationship again, but that doesn't, it's almost trying, I don't know if it's about not hitting those high notes, but knowing what to do after those high notes are hit, maybe.
Well, sure. I mean, that's the thing is when you've got two additive forces together, you're going to reach levels that you wouldn't be able to reach on your own. But the thing is, you want to make sure that your non-high note state is still a state of satisfaction, at least relatively speaking, and internal contentment. It's when you fall into a state of lack, that's where, there's pretty much a message that, hey, there's something off in here. There's something that's been left on them that I need to take back. Right. But, yeah, I mean, that's I don't think there's any way around that fact that we need each other. We're social creatures, and we're not designed to be completely fulfilled as individuals. You have to be whole, but you're not going to be maximized as an individual, I don't think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. Oh, thanks for that perspective. It's like personal coaching. Oh my goodness. Okay. I think it's just wonderful and always really powerful to kind of hear from a man's perspective. What do you feel is the power of a woman?
Well, I'm very kind of practical in this regard. I mean, it's the fact that they can have babies. I think that's the most insane thing. It's the center of life. It literally is so insanely important. And it's been, in my opinion, incredibly devalued in modern times. Incredibly devalued. I mean, when you take two individuals, okay, for the most part, most people do not have an impact on this world where they're going to be remembered for generations. Okay. It's just the reality of it. But, if you, and a partner, you come together and you form a family that, is founded on good principles, that stuff can be passed down for generations, and you can literally impact the world positively in that way for a very long time. And so, like, to me, that is incredibly sacred, incredibly important. And, beyond that, say for the women who don't want to reproduce or can't or whatever, I mean, you have your own wheelhouse, right? You have your own hormonal profile that empowers you to thrive with certain kinds of activities. Like, I would say for a man, his power is that he can potentially be very much in an aggressive, confrontational role and do well and be ordered and serve that, serve through that capacity. And then a woman, if she's very much more on the higher estrogen side, then she has that capability to sit in the feelings and the compassion and to be there and to be this advocate and kind of cultivating support and that sort of thing. And where a guy might just get bored or get drained from that. So it's kind of like, know who you are, know where your power lies, and express that. And I think women as a whole, they've got a tremendous amount to offer the world. Absolutely. It's just, don't throw out the masculine while you're doing it.
Definitely not. All right. Well, closing up, unfortunately, but that's okay. We'll revisit.
Sure.
What do you feel right now women can do to support men, and how can men support women best as well?
I think it's to help each other do what's going to bring us the most fulfillment. And if we're going to put it in kind of the archetypal masculine and feminine framework, as a man, the best thing that I can do, I think, is to make an environment where a woman can open to me. Okay. And so, for example, with my wife, there's no way that I was going to be able to do that if I was a porn user, because of the way she's built up. If she knew, knowing that, just clam right up. It's like, you don't get to see any of this because you don't even think it's special. It's not good enough. It can't compare, whatever. And so she feels unsafe. She feels unvalued, and she can't open. And so as a man, I think, be a man that women can open around, and feel safe around, and not just by being this, soft white knight who behaves like just another one of the girls. Okay. That doesn't work, because the thing that really lets a woman open is the strength in you, knowing that, like, you're not well behaved because you have to be, you're not well behaved because you're naive. Like, you're well behaved because you have a monster that you're in touch with that's well trained. But then on the feminine side, I think they can help men is through recognize that a man wants to be a hero. Okay. That's really what he wants to be. And he's not. A lot of men, they really need the encouragement up until a certain point, and they find themselves, they need encouragement and they need respect, and they need that kind of belief in them, because no one wants to be that. Like, if you're constantly telling a guy that, he all focusing on his faults, focusing on what he's doing wrong, what he's not doing, whatever, he's not going to even believe in himself enough to push himself and try and step up and become, that good man for you. So it's kind of like, does that make sense?
Yeah. How would she encourage him the best?
Reminding him of his own strength, I think, like reminding him of what he really believes, because I think guys can get lost in their own heads. And when they start getting lost in their own heads, they're not taking action, and they're not feeling good about themselves. No guy who is not taking action is going to feel good about himself. So remind him what he wants and help him believe that he can do it. And I think that's what a guy wants more than anything, is to have someone on his side rooting for him, like to have his girl be his number one fan. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it makes me want to cry. Yeah. Thank you so much, Mark. This was just amazing, gorgeous conversation, and looking forward to connecting more in the future and having more of these conversations.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to kind of talk to your audience here, and hopefully they find it useful.
Yeah. And Mark has a YouTube channel, Universal Man, and do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, if you have a man in your life who you think might benefit from checking out some of this stuff, send them over to my YouTube channel, Universal Man. And I'm going to have a bunch of stuff coming out. I actually have a course online already for quitting porn, and it's called nofapacademy.com. There's like, that's one of the movements for quitting porn. It's called nofap. So nofapacademy.com. I assume there's going to be links somewhere. So, you know, if you know a guy who's struggling with this kind of stuff and he wants to get off it, then send him over that way.
Amazing. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you.